It followed me from Crimson Hill forever. The first night back, the porch light threw a feeble coin of yellow into rain-soft darkness, and something sat just beyond it, patient as a question. I had expected mice, or a male pile, or the same hollow wind that used to bruise the eaves. Instead, there was a hush like a held breath, and the old pocket watch in my coat pocket began to click, as if it were remembering how to count my heart. Houses have ways of remembering you, some forgive. This one did something quieter and more tireless. I had left Crimson Hill with every intention of never looking back. At least, that was the tidy version I told myself during the drive. But grief makes the past a small, sticky map, and the farmhouse had keys waiting like a sticky thumb. Inside, the air smelled like old tea and something that wasn't quite dust. The faint, dry sweetness of things forgotten. On the mantel sat a faded photograph, its corners worn to memory. One figure had been lightly scratched away, like someone trying to edit a sentence from a life. Eli came by the third afternoon, footsteps quiet on the porch planks, as if reluctant to disturb settled things. He is the sort who measures silence for you, and then speaks as if choosing the right key, slow, deliberate, small. He told me there were sounds the hill liked to keep, rattles that belonged to it, and that they could learn you. I laughed the first time, because you have to when someone's trying to protect you with folklore. He did not laugh. His eyes were full of cave-dark patience. That night, while I went through drawers and kept finding old receipts and notes that hadn't meant to leave the past, the pocket watch ticked against the wood in a tempo that matched my own half-formed thoughts. Sometimes it stopped mid-breath, then started again when I thought of the photograph. The sound felt like it belonged to some other room. I caught myself watching the attic window across the road. It never reflected a face properly, always a smear, as if the glass preferred suggestion to truth. At first, the signs were ordinary enough. A set of footprints in soft earth that didn't belong to any boot we owned. A chair turned with the same deliberate care people use when they expect someone to return. The shape, if you could call it anything, was punctuation at the edge of perception, a darker space between trees, a length of air a little too patient. It never stepped into the center of things, only into the margins where I caught it when I blinked wrong. Margins have teeth of their own. I tried to tell myself the watch and the photograph were anchors, objects that snag memory so it doesn't fray. But objects can become roots, and I began tracing them like a pilgrim. When the watch's hands halted, I would stop breathing too, waiting to see whether something would answer. Once, on the drive into town, the dashboard light flicked in time with the watch, and for a heartbeat, every other car fell silent. People around me carried on without noticing the hush, as if I had tuned into a private frequency. I began keeping the photograph where I could see it, because sight steadied me, and because rubbing the scratched figure felt like negotiating with an absence. Once, while staring at the two shapes in sepia, I could swear the scratched figure had shifted an inch closer to the other. I blamed fatigue, grief, the way your mind redraws old maps. Yet, when I later compared the photo to the hill outside, the angle was wrong, not because the world had moved, but because the photograph remembered a different gravity. Sleep became a house with thin walls. I would wake certain I had heard someone walking along the porch, only to find soft grooves in the dust that wouldn't match any shoe I knew. Once, in the deep, small hours, the watch began to tick in a rhythm that felt like language. It wasn't words, but it had cadence, insistence. I lay still and tried to listen like a child listening for a storm, hoping to parse pattern from noise. Pattern, I had learned, is the mind's most dangerous, hospitable thing. The more I named the sensations, returning footsteps, the sense someone rearranged the room while I blinked, the more they seemed to practice attention. I stopped trusting the edges of reflections. In a shop window downtown, my face looked right until I adjusted my posture, and my reflection lagged a fraction too long, a hesitation that looked like an answer. People noticed nothing. They bought groceries. They asked polite questions. Only the objects answered me now, and even they hedged their replies. One late evening Eli came again, and we sat on the porch beneath the maples that made the hill look like a sleeping animal. He spoke of small heredities, patterns passed by looks and rituals, by things left on mantles. It's not always something you can chase away, he said, voice like the scrape of leaf on rail. Sometimes it learns you. Then leaving doesn't mean it leaves. I felt the air tighten with the acknowledgement language can feed what it names. After Eli left, the watch stopped for a long time. For a night, I believed that naming had helped, that conversation had starved whatever practiced attention. The relief was small and sharp, like a window opened in a stale room. Then I found new footprints at the foot of my bed in the morning, not the deep impression of a stumbling person, but delicate, like someone who has practiced moving around a sleeping thing. The watch began to tick again, patient as ever, and I understood how wrong I had been to think distance could be absolute. I tried to carry it away. I put the watch in a drawer and left the photograph on the mantel, then drove until town lights lost shape and the air tasted different. For a while, in places with no maples and no attic windows, the interruptions stopped. The watch lay mute. I took long streets and loud cafes, but at some point, at a crosswalk under an anonymous street lamp, my hands found the watch in my coat without me remembering. The hands had started again. Whatever had learned my outline had patience beyond geography. There was a final kind of proof that did nothing to comfort. On a morning that carried no hill at all, the photograph slipped from my pocket and opened on my lap. The scratched figure had shifted closer still, and in the deep grain, I thought I saw an impression like a footprint of light where a face should be. I could not say whether it followed in the night outside or had learned to follow the rooms inside my head. Either way, it was now possible to feel watched by the soft pressure of memory itself. The story never offered a tidy exit. The house on Crimson Hill kept its habits, and I kept mine, and between the two, a patient thing stitched itself into my days. Sometimes it was only a hesitation in a reflection, a pause at a stoplight, a chair that had been nudged a fraction. Sometimes I would look at the photograph and think the scratched space was not empty, but waiting. I learned to live with an audience of absence. The question that stayed was whether absence is a thin, honest thing, or just a clever shape that will, in the end, ask for a name.